One of the things you'll hear most commonly said in middle-brained, 100 IQ history analyses is the talk of the fall of the Roman Empire, or the fall of maybe the Roman Republic, the fall of it, like it was one thing. But people talk a lot about the fall of the Roman Empire as if there's some type of analogy or direct comparison to be made between the United States and the Roman Empire, and you'll hear, oh, Rome fell because of the barbarians, or it fell because of decadence, or the money supply was too great. It was runaway inflation. There's all these factors that people will throw in there. And of course, they're always referring to the fall of the Western Empire. They're talking about the year 476 when so-called Romulus Augustulus was deposed and sent packing to God knows where, and the barbarian sent the Imperial regalia east to Constantinople, to the emperor, and that was it. That was the fall of Rome. But that wasn't the fall of Rome, and by Rome we mean the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire continued on for almost, in one form or another, 1,000 years. Now, of course, the sack of Constantinople by the Venetians and the Latins in 1204 was essentially the death blow to the empire. But the city itself, Constantinople, the first Christian city, continued to have Christian or Roman ruler till 1453, when Mehmed or Mohammed II of the Ottoman Turks took the city. But the fall of the empire, all these types of clickbait articles you'll see, or like I said, some middle brain prognosticator wanting to compare the United States to that, right? Like, oh, we're so decadent now, just like the Romans. Well, what does that even mean, decadent? Nobody can tell you. Because if they do, if they want to say that we are decadent, or the Romans in the 5th century were decadent, one of the things that they have to do is to give you a standard of morality by which that decadence is compared. But what standard of morality do they want to use? Well, I'll tell you, they're probably not going to use the Christian one. And if they're not going to use the Christian one, guess what? Then they're not using the Roman one. Because in the 5th century, and in the 6th century, and the 7th, and the 8th, and the 9th, and the 10th centuries, Roman meant Christian. We know that the Roman Empire fully and finally fell all the way, and it was no more in 1453, because the Roman city, the city, Constantinople, was no longer ruled by a Christian. Christian meant Roman, and Roman meant Christian. And to most of the Italians living in Italy after 476, if you told them they weren't Roman, they wouldn't really know what you meant, because to them they were Roman. Their dress was Roman, their language was Roman, their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents, they were Roman, and they all went to liturgy on Sunday and prayed for the emperor. They're Roman. So, fall of the empire. The Eastern Empire, or what the people back then would have called the Roman Empire, or Romania, continued to be the most powerful state in the Mediterranean up until, and maybe even through and after, the Battle of Manzikert in the 11th century, which precipitated the First Crusades. It was still the greatest state in the world, because something like 75 to 80% of the population and the money of the entirety of the Roman Empire was in the East, meaning east of Italy. And today what would be, the Balkans and Greece, up into modern Romania, the Black Sea, and of course across over into Asia Minor and down into the Levant, and even extending out into Mesopotamia and North Africa and Egypt. That's where the money and the power was. That's not to say losing, so-called, the western half wasn't a cataclysm. It was, especially for the people that lived in what would be modern-day France and southern Germany and, of course, Britain and Spain. But to the rest of the Roman world, it was, maybe just under new management, because they were still Roman, they were still Christian. So what are these people really trying to say or do with comparing the United States to the fall of the Roman Empire in 476? What they're trying to say is that, I think, they're trying to express this feeling in the air, maybe this kind of zeitgeist. I don't know, would it be a zeitgeist? Probably not, but this feeling, this general sense that something is ending in America. Some era is over, which means something else is beginning. And that feeling, I think, started in the fall of 2001 and has continued on, and we're pretty much at the critical mass of that feeling, because the origin of that feeling, I believe, is the passing of the post-World War II consensus of what the country's story is, what our history is, what it means to be an American, what it meant to be an American, what we want from our nation going forward. The World War II narrative that you can see in Hollywood films and television shows and in books, all these history books, these popular history books, some sort of attempt at a profound title followed by a subtitle that says a story of, I don't know, somebody that crashed in the Pacific and lived on a boat through the rest of the war. I don't know. You know the type. We're not talking Stephen Ambrose popular history. We're talking some talking head on TV whose step-grandfather has an interesting story to tell from the war, and now they're going to make some money off doing it, telling it for him since he's long gone. But that story, the Saving Private Ryan story, the Band of Brothers, the Pacific, one that was recently on Apple, Masters of the Year. The Greatest Generation, maybe best exemplified by John Kennedy. That generation is obviously long gone, but their kids have been running the show since, I guess, Nixon got thrown out, since he got a coup done on him. The baby boomers. But the baby boomers, they're all about to be gone. So the story that their dads and their granddads told them about the world and your place in it will really be gone, because very soon, and maybe it's already here, nothing about World War II or the Holocaust or even the Korean War, nothing about it will be in living memory much longer. It'll all be gone. I tell my kids that, I knew somebody that fought in World War I. My great-granddad fought in World War I. I knew him. I met him several times. I barely remember him, but I remember being in his hospital room and grabbing onto his finger to say goodbye. And to them, that sounds crazy. That I could have known somebody that was alive so long ago. But I did. That's how World War II is to people coming up now. To teenagers, people younger, people a little bit older. The people that fought in World War II were born at least 100 years ago. So the way they looked at the world is gone. Nobody sees the world that way anymore. So that's the sense that we are at the end of something and the beginning of a new thing. We don't know what the new thing is. Not yet. And so people want to draw the comparisons to the fall of Rome. It's the fall of something, but I don't think it's the fall of the Western Empire. If it's the fall of anything to draw a comparison to, it's the fall of the so-called fall of the Republic, which is, of course, attributed to the era of Gaius Julius Caesar, the last dictator, and who ancients, by the way, and people in the medieval times said was the first emperor. Today, we don't say he was an emperor. We say he was the last dictator. But everybody back then knew that he was an emperor. Of course he was an emperor. His name was Caesar. Caesar is the name of the emperor. No, Octavian. Augustus was the first emperor. Okay. What was his name? What did he call himself? Oh, that's right. Gaius Julius Caesar. But I digress. So the fall of the Republic is where I think we can draw comparisons. People that are stupid and weak-minded and, I don't know, want to pay lip service to being pro-democracy, whatever that is, whatever that means, will tell you that Julius Caesar, Gaius Julius Caesar, we just say Julius Caesar, that Caesar caused the fall of the Republic, and that he was a tyrant, and he's the reason. And Republic falling meant that it was no longer the rule of the people, and by the people, and for the people, that now it was the rule of one man, Caesar. And I don't have to tell you, it has to be obvious that that is, at best, a gross oversimplification of what happened in that era, the era of Caesar, the era of Antony, the era of Pompey and Cicero and Cato the Younger, who was a drunk and a buffoon. Yeah, Caesar caused the fall of the Republic. Sure, maybe. Not really, though. What we would say is that Julius Caesar was a symptom, and I say a solution, to what was a dying, near-dead, sclerotic system that benefited the oligarchs. Ironically, Caesar, from an old family in Rome, you know his family was old because Caesar had 3 names. Most Romans only had 2 names. Caesar had 3. Caesar was the man of the people. And if you've ever heard the great funeral oration from Shakespeare's play that Mark Antony gives, eulogizing Caesar, you'd say, yeah, that's, Michael, that's a little bit of a, put on there by Shakespeare, and that's maybe not what Mark Antony said all the way. And of course, Mark Antony's making a speech for his own benefit, so take that with a heaping, maybe Carthaginian lot of salt, and maybe you get to the heart of it. But if you go back and read what ancient historians said that Antony said at Caesar's funeral, Shakespeare's rendition of it isn't far off. Of course, it would have been in not English, but you're gonna in your mind say it would have been in Latin. No, it would have been in Greek. But what that speech does is tell you, kind of like they showed in the TV show Rome, but what it indicates to you, dear reader, is that the people did love Caesar. And when the liberators murdered him, there were not throngs of people cheering for the death of Caesar, because Caesar was their instrument against a class of Romans who for decades, 100 years, 200 years, had been literally stealing land from Roman citizens who went off to war to fight the wars that the Senate sent them to, and they'd get home, and yeah, they couldn't pay their rents because they were at war, and some senator has snatched up their family's land, even though it was illegal, even though there were laws in the Republic against a single man owning a certain number of acres. They did it anyway, which disenfranchised those men, disenfranchised their descendants, took their livelihoods away, while they had been out fighting and killing at the request of the state. And Caesar is the man who is giving it back to them. The ability of Caesar to do that was, of course, not his doing. It's the world he was born in. He was born into the world of Marius and Sulla, men who the system let accrue an unbelievable amount of personal power that functioned like the power of the state. So Caesar was really just the consequence of a failing system. He was not the cause of it. He was the solution to the problem. And that here you have a state which is represented by the 4 letters SPQR, Senatus Populesque Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome, when really it was just SR, the Senate of Rome. They had all the money, they had all the power. And that's not to say that Caesar was a communist. Caesar was not a communist. Or a socialist or whatever. Caesar wasn't for giving everybody the same amount of money. Caesar was for the glory of Rome. And the glory of Rome is its people, is its citizens. So if anything's ending in America, it's the oligarchy.